Let's take a moment and generate our motivation. And think that we will listen in order to learn about ourselves and to learn about other living beings, so that we can develop a more realistic attitude towards the world and living beings, and a more beneficial attitude towards them. And to do this not only so that we can be happier, but so that we can make a positive contribution to other living beings here and now, and also by progressing along the path to full awakening, be able to attain a state where we can really be of great benefit to all living beings. So even though enlightenment may be a ways off, we still can have that long-term aspiration going in that direction, and have that infuse what we do in our life right now. Okay, so you'll notice that we talk an awful lot about motivation. Yeah. Before you offer service, before we have a Dharma talk, there's always talk of motivation. And that's because our motivation is the most important element of what we do. So it's not the action per se, it's not what other people think of what we did, it's our motivation for doing whatever it was that we did. Okay? So this is very different than how things are in the general landscape of the world, where we get praised or blamed according to other people's opinion of how what we did looks from the outside. Whereas our motivation, our intention, is something internal that we're the only ones who know about that. Okay? But we're so used to trying to look good on the outside that we often forget about what's going on in the inside and lose track of why we're doing what we're doing. Yeah, and especially, in society, when, your parents want you to do this and your friends are doing that, and the media is telling you this is what it means to be successful, then it's very easy just to follow these kind of influences without thinking about them too much, because that's what everybody else is doing. And, but it really leaves us quite blind, because the impact, the value of our action and the impact of our actions in terms of karma depend on our motivation. Okay? So to give you about an example about the difference between how society usually looks at these kinds of things and, how Buddhists look at it. Let me ask you, is there cold air coming out of the aircon? Because this building is supposedly air conditioned. So I think it's probably good to close the windows. Hopefully it will. Yeah, this building is aircon, but we always seem to open these windows, and I wonder why. Yeah? Be nice to have it cool here. Okay, so an example I often give is, there's an organization that is raising money, let's say, to build a homeless shelter in a city, or a clinic for low-income people in a town. And so people are collecting donations. So there's one person who, he's quite wealthy, his business is doing very good, so he writes out a check for $1 million, to give to fund this project, and his idea is, well, I'm known in this city, and I'll give $1 million, and in the entryway to the homeless shelter, the clinic, they'll have a plaque, saying, thanking me for making a huge donation to this project. So he gives his $1 million. Then there's another person who doesn't have so much money, but gives $20 for the same project. But their thought is, I hope everybody who comes to this shelter, everybody who goes to this clinic, receives what they need so that they can live a peaceful life, a happy life, without having health problems and home problems and so on. And they give their $20. Now, who gets praised? The big guy who gave $1 million. Did he have a virtuous motivation? No, his motivation was completely for the sake of his own reputation. So he would have a good reputation, so he would get praised. The person who gave $20, did they have a good motivation? Yeah, they were caring about the people who were going to benefit from their donation. Does society pay any attention to them? No. Okay? But in terms of karma, who is the person who created virtuous karma? It's the person who gave $20 with a very wonderful motivation. Yeah. And so that person, by the power of their motivation, is creating a very virtuous action. The person who gave $1 million, their motive, it's good that they gave something, there's some virtue in that, but their motivation was just very typical worldly, motivation. How can I have a good reputation and look good in other people's eyes? Okay? So in our lives, people in this life may get rewarded or dismissed based on how they look, but to other people, but in terms of karma, it's going to depend on what was going on in your mind when you did the action. Okay? So that's why we spend so much time looking at our motivation and really deliberately cultivating a good motivation. So it's interesting even to ask yourself, why did you come here for the Young Adult Week? What was your motivation? And then, how's your motivation changed since you've been here? Yeah. So you've been, And what have you learned about, deliberately cultivating a good motivation? And are there certain times when you see that your motivation is rather, maybe it's anger or laziness or selfishness of some sort, but then seeing that in your mind, you're able to pause and then deliberately cultivate another motivation that is better quality, that isn't just thinking about my happiness now. Okay? So this is quite important, and it really makes you think, because it means that not to trust what society values if it's only looking on the surface. We have to look inside of our own heart and see what's going on. And so this thing of evaluating ourselves is actually much more important, not necessarily evaluating ourselves, but getting in touch with our motivation is much more important than creating a good image on the outside. Because we may succeed in creating a good image and get lots of kudos and so on and be rich and famous, but what's it like when we're alone? Is our heart happy? What's it going to be like at the time of death? Are we going to feel good about our life? Because most people think, okay, got to work hard, got to get a lot of money. That's the sign of success. That way, the world will think I'm successful and will approve of me. Yeah. But have you ever heard anybody on their deathbed saying, wow, I should have worked more overtime so I could have had more money? Yeah? That's ridiculous, isn't it? You die, oh, I should have worked more overtime, I missed having more money. What do people usually regret when they die? Yeah, working too much for things that aren't valuable in the long term, and not really appreciating other people and connecting with other people. And that's what you hear people regretting. So it's good to learn these kinds of things when we're young, and so that we can live a healthy life and not die with a whole pile of regrets. And so I think that doing that involves, as much as possible, to keep on being aware of what our motivation is and then deliberately improving it. Yeah. And also when we slip up and when we do negative actions, instead of falling into this thing of what a bad person I am and I'm a failure and blah, 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 to do some purification practice and to make amends for our mistakes. And if we do that on a daily basis, then from one day to the next, we're not carrying with us guilt and remorse and all this heaviness that you see, Sometimes, you can see, can't you, as people get older, some people, life has knocked them around and they haven't been able to make peace with what's happened, and so there's a certain bitterness, a certain anger, a certain remorse or regret. And that means that somebody's kind of out of touch with what's here, and they haven't really made peace with things in their lives, and maybe they've made some decisions that haven't been so good, but rather than learn from those circumstances, they beat themselves up. I'm so bad, I'm so terrible because I did X, Y, and Z. So I think, we're all going to make mistakes, but if we can learn from our mistakes, and especially learn about our motivation, what was I thinking? What was my intention that led me to get involved in that situation? And like I said, most of the time we aren't even aware of our intention. And sometimes it may take us years to figure out what our intention was. But this is, really where we start learning about ourselves and gain some power over our lives. What did I do? What was I thinking when I made that choice, that decision? What was I looking for? And then what were the outcomes of what I did? And then sometimes we see, boy, I really blew it. I was just feeling, I was craving for praise and reputation, and I did X, Y, and Z, and it turned out into a big mess. And so what am I going to do about it? Am I going to sit there and just blame myself forever and hate myself? That's certainly no good. That doesn't do any good. Totally no value. Or can I look there and be responsible for the part of the situation that was my responsibility? And own that part, think about how I got involved in it, what I could do differently next time, how my motivation could be improved if something like that happened again. So what can I learn? and then, regret our previous decision, make a determination to do it differently. Yeah. And then we have purification methods in Buddhist practice that we use. And then you go on with your life, and you go on with more wisdom instead of more bitterness and self-reproach. Okay, and that's really important, because who wants to grow old and just be, sometimes I think that's why people are bent over. It's not just because of their body growing old, but because they're sitting there carrying bricks on their back of things that they regret, that they never made peace with, that they never just owned. By making peace, I mean, it's like, okay, I did that. Yeah, bad decision. Yeah, but I'm responsible for it. I need to make amends. Yeah, I need to understand why I got involved in that, and make a decision to do things differently in the future. And then, if you do that kind of process, then you don't grow old with all this psychological self-hatred and remorse and so on. Okay? So that's important. And another thing that's important is to be able to discern what is our responsibility and what is other people's responsibility. Because sometimes we get these things very, very confused. And things that are our responsibility, we don't take responsibility for. And things that are not our responsibility, we take responsibility for and feel guilty about. Okay? So, let's look at some examples. Well, last night I was talking about having friends and relatives who have substance abuse problems. Okay? So, if you have a friend or a relative who has a substance abuse problem, but in your life you have been trying to encourage them and, do what you can to help because you care about them, but they continue to misuse drugs and alcohol, is their abuse problem your responsibility? Did you cause it? Hello? No, you didn't. Okay? If you do something, some action, with a good intention, but your parents misunderstand it, and they're unhappy, is their unhappiness your responsibility? Are you the cause of that? No. Okay. If your parents are unhappy about something you did, and you did that action out of spite, not necessarily for your parents, but spite for somebody else, and then your parents are unhappy about it, is that your responsibility? Yeah. Because your motivation was rotten. Okay? In the case of your relative who has substance abuse problems, if you give them money and you know for sure they're going to take it and use it for drugs or booze, yeah, then is that a wise decision? Unwise decision? Yeah, pretty unwise. What about if they say, but you're my brother's sister, I'm just asking you for some money. I'm not going to use it for dope and alcohol. Why don't you give me some money? You're my sibling. We're always together. We're close. How come you don't give me any money? Yeah. Then we have to be very clear in our own mind, and with a motivation that cares about them, say no. even if they're going to be really mad at us afterwards. Yeah? So just because somebody's mad at us after we do something doesn't mean that what we're doing is wrong. Okay. In the same way, just because somebody is happy with what we're doing doesn't mean that what we did was virtuous. Yeah? Like, your old friends who are drinking and drugging and want to see you, and you've been away for this week at this Buddhist kind of thing, and why don't I want to hear what you did, and so let's go out and have a drink, or a smoke or something like that, and you go because you're thinking, I'm close to this person, and I can teach them the Dharma this way. This is going to be really good for them if I go. And, well, they'll probably want me to use something, but that's okay. I'll just use a little bit so that they don't think that I'm weird, and I'm prudish after going to this Buddhist thing. Yeah. So I'll go and, have, like I kind of always did with these friends. We smoke a joint, we take some drug, we do something, and then I'll tell them all about it, and it's for their benefit. What do you think about that? But they're your friends, and they're going to look at you and say, you went away to some Buddhist thing looking at your belly button for a week, and now you come back? Yeah? What did they do to you? Now you come back, you won't even smoke a joint with me anymore? What's happening? Yeah? Are you crazy? Yeah? And they talk like that to you, and they're your best friends. Then what? We're your best friends. So you see, we have to have our own values very clear and be very, clear in our own mind about how we want to live. Yeah. And some people will like it and some people won't. But the important thing is that we are very clear about our motivation, and that we don't have any regret about our motivation, that we know from our side we were trying to be helpful, we were trying to be kind. Yeah. Sometimes we try and be helpful and kind, and the whole thing blows up in our face. Yeah? You try and help some, and then it completely blows up. Yeah. Well, again, it's a situation where you need to look and okay, I did my best, I tried my best. Yeah. Was there some aspect of my motivation that I was blind to that I need to look at? Or was my motivation okay, but I didn't really assess the task to be done closely enough, and so I wasn't able to really carry it through the way I would have liked to. Yeah. So where can I learn from that situation? Okay. But I'll tell you one secret. It's impossible to make anybody else happy if you are trying to make them happy. If you are trying to be a people pleaser, people pleasers, yeah? So you're dancing around all the time trying to please other people so that they will like you. Not because you really care about them, but because you want them to like you and not criticize you. Yeah? If you have that kind of motivation and go through life with that motivation, you will never succeed in pleasing all those people. Never. Because they will always want you to do something else. One more thing, one other thing. Yeah. And because your motivation, it looks like a good motivation. I'm trying to make them happy. But it's not really because I want them to be happy so that they will like me. So I want them to be happy so that they won't say bad things about me, so that they'll say nice things about me. It's not that I really want you to be happy because I care about you, but if you're happy, then you'll do something that will make me happy. Yeah. In other words, I know how to subtly manipulate. Yeah? I know how to do something with a self-centered motivation, but make it look like an altruistic motivation. Yeah. So I know how to pull the wool over somebody's eyes. And this is a difficult thing to admit to ourselves sometimes, that we do this kind of thing. Yeah. But the more we can be truthful with ourselves, and then, really take care to cultivate good motivations, then the more we will feel at peace in ourselves, no matter how the other person responds. Because if we're doing people-pleasing, trying to make them happy so that they'll like us, if they aren't happy, then how do we feel? I failed. I'm no good. Yeah. Their happiness is my responsibility. No. My motivations are my responsibility. Yeah. If I want them to be happy because I care about them, that's a good motivation. But if I want them to be happy so that then they will introduce me to important people, which might help my career or might help me in some way, yeah, that's not such a good motivation, is it? Kind of phony baloney. I pretend to be nice to you because I can get something out of you. And the thing is, at the end of the day, we're the ones who have to live with ourselves. And we're the ones who know what our motivations really are. And so it's much better to be able to live a life in a very clean, clear way, even if we don't get a lot of praise and approval from outside. But that way we will feel at peace in our own hearts, rather than to try and please everybody and then get mad when they aren't pleased, do things with totally the wrong motivation. Yeah. If I dare speak about politics, I think the president is a very good example of somebody who is very attached to his reputation in this life. Yeah, and so watches TV. We hear reports that he watches cable TV hour after hour. Yeah, and he gets very angry when the news stations say things that he doesn't like about him. Okay? So then he gets angry, then he says fake news. Yeah. So what, and then he makes certain policies to please his base. So, for example, we all know that when he was a candidate, in terms of his policies about LGBTQ, I get it very to LGBTQ. LGBTIQ. God, can't we say ABs? Okay, so, before he was pretty easy about all of that, the comments he made and everything. Then he gets in office to win praise from his base. then he starts enacting all sorts of prejudicial policies. So, we can also see, this is somebody who makes decisions based on popularity, basically. Yeah? Having his own ego stroked. And you can see what problems that creates for the country when you have somebody in a position of power who is acting with that kind of motivation. Yeah. And you can also see how much this person suffers. Yeah. He is angry most of the time. Most of the time he's raging about something. When you're angry, you're not happy. So here's somebody who's quite unhappy, trying to get all the praise, and not just praise, attention. He's happy even with negative attention. Yeah, anything will do. You're really desperate then. Yeah. And as a result, very unhappy most of the time. Yeah. And see, when I think, what is it like to be him when he goes to bed at night with his own thoughts? Yeah? Is this somebody who is going to have a peaceful mind, who goes to bed at night and says, wow, I feel good about what I did today to, help improve the state of the world? I don't think he thinks about that. Yeah. Obama did. Obama cared. Present president is in another space. Yeah. But we can look at these people and learn something from them about, what about me? How do I act? And okay, I'm not in the public eye like they are, but how do some of those same motivations appear in my mind and manifest in my life? Okay? And so it gives us a good way just to look and see and, and then knowing that we are people who are capable of change, knowing that we have the Buddha nature. And that it's simply a matter of conditioning ourselves to see things in a different way. So knowing all this, then, the ways that we want to change to become the kind of people we want to become, then we start doing those practices and those activities that help us to change in that way. Okay? And that's basically what Dharma practice is. Yeah, Dharma practice is learning how to control and apply the antidotes to destructive mental states, to, rotten motivations, and how to transform those, and how to generate good motivations and engage in activities that benefit ourselves and benefit others. That's basically what Dharma practice is. Yeah. All the rest is stuff that helps you. Okay. So Dharma practice is not the robes, it's not the statues, it's not wearing a mala, it's not, telling stories of fantastic meditation sessions you had where, the Buddha appeared to you and spoke to you. It's not anything like that. Real Dharma practice is just observing our mind, and when there's a non-virtuous or some kind of dysfunctional thought or motivation, then applying the antidote to that, and then also learning how to generate good thoughts and motivations that produce beneficial actions. So that's something that we do everywhere, anywhere, no matter who we're with. It's not something you do on Sunday morning and then forget about the rest of the week. Yeah, it's something that we live on a daily basis. And in that way, we can really start transforming ourselves in a really quite beautiful way. So if there's things that we regret from our lives, then it's good to do purification practice, yeah, to own up to these things, to regret them, see what we want to do different in the future. But also to make sure that when we're regretting something, it was actually something that was our responsibility. Because sometimes we take responsibility for things that were not our responsibility. Okay? For example, sexual abuse cases, child abuse, very often the child blames themselves for an adult having abused them. The child thinks, I did something wrong, that's why, this adult did this to me, or I'm defective somehow, or I hurt somebody. So the child blames themselves for something that is the responsibility of the adult. It's not the responsibility of the child. Yeah. Same thing in rape cases. Our society very often tends to blame the victim. Excuse me? Yeah? People aren't going around looking to be raped. They're not the ones who initiated it. It is not their responsibility. Yeah, it's the person who misbehaved who bears the responsibility for that. Okay, so it's very important that we're clear about these kinds of things. And don't blame ourselves and don't feel guilty about things that were done to us that were not our choice. People suffering in Syria right now, their homes are getting bombed and, atrocious things. If they were to say, it's my fault because I'm living in a house that's getting bombed. No, it's the responsibility lies with the people that are bombing. Yeah. Okay. Quite important not to blame ourselves for things that are not our responsibility. Yeah, it is very sad, isn't it? When we really get in touch with our own heart, his is a very sad situation. When we're not in touch with our heart, then we're really ticked off at this idiot. It's like, oh my God, how can he act that way? How can he do that thing? This guy has such a beep, 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 beep. But we say that because we're not really in touch. We're not connecting with him on a heart level. If we were able to look into his heart and see, that what he's doing is motivated by his own inner pain. Yeah? Because when people are peaceful, when people are genuinely happy, they don't do things that harm others. You don't when you're peaceful inside, you don't wake up in the morning saying, gee, I wonder whose feelings I can hurt this morning. Gee, I wonder who I can retaliate against for harming me. Yeah, when you're peaceful, you don't think like that. That's how we think when our own minds are turbulent and when the afflictions are operating in our own mind. Then we want revenge. We want to give them a taste of their own medicine. We want them to suffer. So it's very strange how we think. Our thinking in many ways is completely ridiculous. Here's somebody who's doing harmful actions, and we want them to suffer. Okay? If they suffer, are they going to stop doing those harmful actions? No. Maybe if we made them really afraid, if we, used fear-based tactics and made them really afraid, then maybe they would do it. But they wouldn't stop those bad actions because they realized they were bad actions. They would do it out of self-protection, out of fear. Fear is not a very good reason for avoiding something. Okay? So why do we wish suffering on the people who have harmed us? They're already suffering. If, we always say, that guy's such an idiot, I want him to go to hell. Okay, he goes to hell. Is that going to change his behavior? Is that going to make us happy? Even if we could be the ones who sent him to hell. Oh, that's so good. I was in the truck that ran over him. I sent him to hell. I got my revenge. Oh, I feel so good today. Now you might meet somebody who once in a while feels that way on the surface, but in the depth of their heart, when they're alone, do they feel good about themselves? Oh, I rejoice because I caused somebody excruciating pain. Yippee! I feel so satisfied today. I caused so much pain. They're not going to feel good about themselves at the end of the day like that. Yeah. So especially the people who do harmful deeds, these are the people who are most in need of compassion. Yeah. And compassion from a Buddhist viewpoint means that we want somebody to be free of suffering and the causes of suffering. Okay, that's it. That's all compassion is. Yeah. Compassion does not mean you're Mr. or Ms. Fix-It and you jump in and, solve all their problems for them so that they become a model of what you want them to be. Yeah, that's not compassion. So, compassion is just wanting them to be free of suffering and the cause of suffering, knowing that they are creating a lot of their own causes of suffering. When you understand karma, you see, wow, here's somebody who's unhappy. What they're doing is creating incredible negative karma that is going to bring them more suffering in future lives. And that's really a tragedy. You look at the president and you think, oh, here's somebody who's rich, he's powerful, yeah, his whole family is good looking, not particularly to my eyes, they all look kind of plastic. But anyway, that's the way society sees them. Oh, there's the beauty and da. And are they creating the causes for happiness, the karmic causes for happiness in future lives? Yeah. When you are racist, when you are biased against people of other religions, are you creating good karma that's going to bring you happiness in a future life? No. Yeah. And yet you can see, how deep ignorance is because they want to be happy and yet they're creating the causes of suffering. And the thing is, we do the exact same thing. Yeah, we're not any different. It's just so much easier to make fun of them. So much easier to see other people's mistakes. You can even see with the president, this whole Russia thing, he's the one who keeps it alive by his tweets. It's like if he would stop tweeting, the whole issue would probably fade away. But he keeps stirring things up. It's called shooting yourself in the foot. Yeah? Yeah? So, but we do the same things too, we keep on, creating the causes for our own suffering here and now. And sometimes creating the karmic causes for misfortunes in future lives. So when we can see how we do that, and then we can see how other people do the same thing, and then we can see that just as we want happiness, they do, but just as our mind is uncontrolled and we make mistakes, so their minds are uncontrolled and they make mistakes. Then we can have a type of compassion for them that's like from one equal to the other equal. Okay? So it's not like, I am a spiritual practitioner. I practice Buddhism. And I create so much good karma. But you, Mr. Trump, are just a slob. You know? But I feel so sorry for you. You're creating so much negative karma. Do you realize you're going to be born in hell next life? You know? And do you realize that you deserve that? You know? And I'm going to come teach you, you poor slob, yeah, how to live a virtuous life. You just follow me. Yeah, and my donation bowl is right here. Yeah? That's not compassion, is it? That's not compassion. Okay. So they say compassion is like the hand pulling a thorn out of the foot. Okay? Your foot steps on a thorn, or a rusty nail, whatever it is. You know, out in the forest it's a thorn, maybe. In the city it's a rusty nail. The hand reaches down and pulls it out. You know, puts some antibiotic in, bandages it up, and life goes on. The hand doesn't go, oh, foot, you did it again. I've told you so many times to watch where you are walking, and you just don't listen to me. And you didn't watch where you were walking. You stepped on this thorn, and you know, it's really inconvenient for me to help you. But you are so lucky you have me in your life, foot. Because I, the great and glorious hand, again am going to come to your rescue, you dimwit, and pull that thorn out and bandage your foot. So, you know, please learn your lesson this time. And remember, I did you a favor. And you owe me something now. Okay? That's not the way the hand handles it. Hand just reaches down, pulls out the foot, pulls out the thorn. Yeah, bandages the foot, and life goes on. Why? Because the hand and the foot see themselves as part of the same organism. You know, what we call I, you know. It's part of the same person. So the hand helps the foot automatically. If we had the idea in our mind that we are all part of this international, interstellar group called all sentient beings, then we would help another sentient being just like the hand helps the foot. You know? It's not any big deal. It's just what you do because you're all interrelated as part of the same organism. Yeah. No guilt trips, no contempt, no, you know, any of this kind of stuff. Just very clean, clear, helping, and life goes on. Wouldn't that be nice to be able to look at the people in your life that way? And just when there's a chance to help, you just do it, and then it's finished. Instead of, oh, well, should I help that person? Is it beneficial for them? Is it not beneficial? What else might happen? You know, I helped them last time. If I help them again this time, they're going to take me granted, and they're going to start taking advantage of me, so I don't know. I don't think I should help them, but if I don't help them, then I feel really guilty about it, and I don't feel guilty. So then maybe I should help them, but then if I help them, I get, all tangled up in their whole drama, and I don't want to get tired. You know how our minds create a drama over some small thing? Yeah, some small thing. We create a whole drama. But wouldn't it be just nice, like, okay, somebody needs help peeling the potatoes, we go help. Finished. Wasn't that, I feel good I was able to help, cook a good lunch for people. I feel happy about that. Yeah. Doesn't matter, they don't all need to come and make 3 prostrations and say thank you for peeling the potatoes. Yeah. It'd be nice to be able to be that way, wouldn't it? So we can try. Why not? Why not? We just try. Just do what we can. Yeah. I was sitting on a flight once. You'll find I give flight stories a lot because I travel. So I was sitting next to one lady who had a baby who was fussing a lot. And it was just quite natural that I took the baby. It was like nothing. I just took the baby and held the baby and took care of it. And, and it was fine. And she got a little break, which she needed. And that was it. And, towards the end, when the flame was on, I handed the baby back. And, I was good. It was okay. I wasn't going to take her baby. Yeah, but it all happened just kind of naturally. Yeah. As opposed to another one of my flight stories, where I was coming back from Knoxville, Tennessee, where I had just gotten done teaching part of a text called the 7-Point Mind Training, which talks about how to develop compassion and how to transform adversity into the path. So, I had booked an aisle seat because it was a long flight. I had to go Tennessee to someplace else and then to Seattle. So I, reserved an aisle seat. So I got on the plane, after this nice, wonderful weekend teaching these very nice people in Knoxville. And I get to my seat and somebody's sitting in my seat. And I said, "Oh, excuse me, you're in my seat." And she said, "Oh, yeah, I know, I have the middle seat, but I was really hoping to be able to sit here because I'm really kind of tired." And I said, "I am too. Yeah, I booked the seat. Would you please move into your own seat?" This is the weekend after I had taught all about love and compassion. And so, of course, as soon as I said that, I thought, oh my God, look what I did. This is children, come on. So I felt really like, I'm not living up to my own values here. And so I said, okay, how about if we split the time in the seats, And she said, no, it's okay, I'll stay here. Oh, I would have been so much happier if I had just given her the seat to start with, Okay, so you live and you make mistakes and you learn from your mistakes and then you do the same mistake the next time and after a while you begin to see, no, I really have to change, This isn't working for me. Just thinking about myself is not really to my own advantage. Yeah. Okay, in the case of, the person who's just doing their job to get money to help their family, That's not a particularly, maybe to help their family, that part is good, but it's also kind of self-centered motivation. So, whether they get merit or not, it's hard for me to say. But their creating merit is not the same as their being kind to me. Okay? Because why are they kind to me, even if they don't have a particularly virtuous intention? Because without them making the clothes, I would be bereft of clothes. So the bottom line is I benefit from their work. That's what makes them kind. Yeah, so we evaluate their kindness to us, not in terms of their motivation, but in terms of the fact that we benefit from it. When we look at our kindness to others, we examine the quality of our motivation to see if we were really kind. Okay? Yeah. And so that's why we can say that strangers that we don't know have been very kind to us, because we benefit from, I know the people who built this building. Yeah, they were here for over a year. I got to know them. But do you know the people who built this building? No, but yet you come in here and you're able to have a room to hear the Dharma teachings, and a dining room and a kitchen for the food to be prepared, due to the labor of many, many people. Yeah. So simply because of that, no matter what their motivation was, what karma they created is something else. But in terms of their kindness to us, they've been kind. Okay. And that's why also we can see people who sometimes try to harm us, or the people who hurt our feelings, as having been kind to us. Okay? It sounds very strange, but it really makes a lot of sense when you think about it. Okay? I have many examples of that. Which one shall I tell? Okay, so there was one student who, this was many years ago, probably about 20 years ago now, who, I was trying to help them in the Dharma and teach them and and they had a position in the group where I was teaching, so they were being very, very helpful. I benefited from their help, and we worked well together. And then one day, out of the clear blue, he just said, "I'm quitting, goodbye." And it was on my birthday. So the group was gathering for a birthday celebration. He didn't come. He wrote me this letter, said, "I'm quitting, goodbye, I'm not going to be part of this group anymore." And I'm like, what? What? I had no idea this kind of thing was coming. I'm like, what? So it was very, very hard for me, yeah. And also because he was doing a lot of work in the group, and so now there was this empty position, and so on and so forth. So it was very, very hard for me. But after a while, as things turned out, I was going to do retreat very soon after that, which was good. And so I thought about this situation a lot during my retreat. And what I learned from it was that I really had a lot of expectations for this person. And that my expectations were not very fair. Because I didn't really, when we have expectations of people, we don't ask them if it's okay, we expect that from them. We just assume that they're going to do what we want them to do. We don't check with them. So I realized, my false expectations are my problem. Yeah, I had some really too many expectations. I didn't give him enough space. And that's my problem. So I really learned so much from this. So it was very painful, but at the end, I really thought, wow, thank you so much, because you taught me something that has really benefited me since then, that I would not have learned in any other way. If somebody had come up to me and said, you have too high expectations, I just said, what are you talking about? Yeah? But sometimes it's only when you get, that you're, oh, I hit my head. Oh, duh, there's a wall there. I wasn't seeing it. Now I see it. Thank you for showing me the wall. Now I won't hit my head next time. Yeah? So you learn to appreciate even things that might have been difficult for you in your life. Why do you appreciate them? Because you learned. Why do you say that the person was kind to you? Because they contributed to that situation that from which you learned something very important in your life. Yeah? So you see what I mean about learning from our mistakes instead of just sitting there, because I could have just gone, oh, woe is me, somebody betrayed my trust, I could still be crying about it 20 years later. For what purpose? Yeah? But in seeing, what was my responsibility, and then really saying, he was kind in that way. Even though for a while he was an enemy in terms of somebody who made me unhappy, I have to thank him. Yeah, so we had agreed on everything, we trusted them, then they go and do the exact opposite, kind of as if from the beginning they knew that they were going to do that. Okay. So when people have betrayed our trust, it's very painful, isn't it? Yeah, I think it's one of the most painful things, is the betrayal of trust, because you thought one thing of the person and then you find out the opposite. Very painful. And it's interesting when we experience a situation of betrayal of trust, we feel like we're the only person who's ever been hurt that bad. Yeah, nobody else has ever been hurt this bad. Nobody else has ever had their trust betrayed the way I'm experiencing it, My pain is unique, which of course is not true. But, even in that situation, I have a little slogan, okay, for those kinds of situations, which is, sentient beings do what sentient beings do. Okay? A sentient being, especially ordinary sentient beings, their minds are overwhelmed by afflictions, by ignorance, anger, clinging, attachment, pride, jealousy. Why do I expect them always to have crystal clear, beautiful motivations? Why do I expect them to always make good decisions? They're sentient beings. They have deluded minds. Yeah, that's why they're sentient beings, and they're not Aryas, and they're not Bodhisattvas, and they're not Buddhas, because their minds are overwhelmed by afflictions. So why am I expecting them to be different? That's my problem. Yeah? I'm expecting them to be bodhisattvas. They are ordinary sentient beings with confused minds that are overwhelmed by afflictions. And those are people who are the objects of compassion. Yeah? Okay, what they did may have hurt me, but that's partly because I expected them to be perfect bodhisattvas. They didn't sign up for that job. Yeah, they may have agreed to help me, paint the house or whatever it was, or they may have said, I'm going to love you forever. Yeah, but they're ordinary sentient beings. Yeah? An ordinary sentient being says, I'm going to love you forever. Is it wise to believe that? Yeah? When you say to somebody, I'm going to love you forever, are you certain you're going to love them forever? Are you really certain? Yeah. What does love them anyway mean? Yeah. What does it mean to love somebody? Okay. I'm going to be physically attracted to you forever. You know, I love you now because you're really good looking and my hormones are raging. But you know, when you're 80 years old, and I am too, and my hormones are like out the window, and you look like my grandpa, you know, am I going to love you then? Okay? We have to really think, what does it mean to love somebody? They go together. Yeah. Love and compassion can have a very good marriage. Okay? Ordinary sentient beings, you know, it's a bit tricky, but love and compassion can be married and very, very compatible. Yeah. You know, wanting just to have a reputation as being rich and famous and athletic and artistic and blah, blah. You know, that we can see quite egotistical. But what about wanting to have, your question is, what about wanting to have a reputation as being an ethical person? Okay? So that's going to depend exactly how you hold that. Is it going to be, well, I want the reputation of being an ethical person, so that people will know that I am superior, that I am an excellent practitioner, that I hold my precepts squeaky clean because I am so spiritually advanced. Okay? No. But if, you know, they say to care about what the wise say. And if the wise people kind of, then we need to think, is what we're doing good? Yeah? So in that way, paying attention to what people say is important. Also, in the Bodhisattva precepts, since when you practice the Bodhisattva path, you really want to benefit others, if other people misunderstand what you do, or for some reason kind of dislike you, in the Bodhisattva precepts, you have the responsibility to go to that person and try and clear up the misunderstanding. Why? Because if that person thinks badly of you, then you're not going to be able to benefit them in terms of the Dharma. So you need to have a reputation of being an ethical person in order to benefit somebody like that. So you need to go and clear up the misunderstanding. But again, it's because you want to benefit them, and because there's this one mental there's two mental factors, yeah? One I call integrity, which is you want to abandon harm and practice what is beneficial because of your own sense of personal integrity, your own values. And the other mental factor is called consideration for others. So there we want to, abandon harming others and do what is beneficial because we actually care about them. And we don't want our bad behavior to make them disillusioned about the Dharma. Okay? So if you have either of those two attitudes, integrity or consideration for others, then, and you want to, have a good reputation as an ethical person, that's fine because those are virtuous motivations. Well, just a lack of compassion, just if you have a neutral mind, that's not necessarily non-virtuous. If you just kind of don't notice something and your mind is neutral. It's when you have a harmful mind that's non-virtuous.
So I'm wondering if it's the same way with self-compassion, like if you have non-compassionate thoughts or actions toward yourself, that's the same, in the same way, not a virtuous thing.
Yeah, you mean like anger at ourselves, and tearing ourselves apart. You're such an idiot, and no wonder nobody loves you, and yeah, okay, you're all familiar with that, right? Yeah. So I would say that kind of mind is not a virtuous mind. It's quite a skewed mind, It's basically a bunch of lies. Yeah, we're sitting there lying to ourselves. Nobody loves me because I'm such a creep and I can't do anything right. And of course I blew this whole project because I blow everything and I can't think clearly, and this is wrong with me and that's wrong with me, and I'm never going to amount to anything anyway. And all that stuff is just a whole bunch of lies. And yet we think it about ourselves and we believe it. And it's total rubbish. Yeah? Total rubbish. Again, total rubbish. And we have to really be able to look at that and see, all those separate self-deprecating thoughts, they're not true. I'm the worst one in the world. Really? Really? I'm the worst one in the world. Yeah? The worst one. Nobody loves me. Really? Nobody loves me? Yeah, my cats love me. There's actually some people who love me too if I would only open my eyes and let their love come in instead of blocking their love and saying I'm unworthy. Yeah? I can't do anything right. I can make toast. Yeah? I can do a lot of things right. So you see, these are very all or nothing statements we make about ourselves are just a bunch of lies. And we need to see them as lies. And just like, why am I lying to myself? Put that down.
Yeah, so I feel like someone with that sort of mentality, with that self-shaping, just like general state of mind, I feel like telling them that is a non-virtuous state of mind would actually just drive them in the same direction they're going. So
right.
How do you go about?
I don't go and say, you're putting yourself down a lot. You're creating the cause to be born in hell. I don't think that's, going to be, yeah. First of all, they're already in hell by the way they're thinking. Okay? So that certainly isn't going to help.
Because I feel like even just having that discussion, there could be someone in this room where we have no clue if they're that way or not. So even just naming it that way, I feel like is almost doing more harm than good in that situation. You get what I'm saying? Yeah,
I get what you're saying. But it's not something that I would look at and say, point my finger and say, non-virtue. Because you see, we have grown up in a culture where we make good and bad, virtuous and non-virtuous. We make somebody who does something non-virtuous becomes an evil person. Yeah. And then we have the right to judge them because they are morally inferior and they need to be punished. That whole way that our culture looks at people is rubbish. The action and the person who does the action, those are two different things. The action may be harmful, it may be non-virtuous. That does not mean that the person is evil. It does not mean the person is a failure. Yeah. Everybody has the potential to become a fully awakened Buddha. You cannot say somebody is evil if they have the potential to become a Buddha. So there's non-virtue. But the point of those thoughts, the way to get rid of those thoughts is not to go, oh, I'm such a horrible person, and on top of this, thinking that thought is again non-virtuous, so it really shows what a horrible person I am. You know, it's like garbage. You know, it's like, I'm thinking that thought. Is that thought true? Is that thought beneficial? Does it help me? Does it help anybody else? No. Then why am I holding on to that thought? Yeah, it's not realistic and it's not beneficial. Yeah, not beneficial, not realistic. And that whole way our society thinks, moralistic judgment, good and evil, it's all, there's a word called namtok in Tibetan. It means conceptualization or superstitious thought. Stuff that we made up. Yeah. So there's all this stuff that people have made up for centuries and passed down to their kids that is rubbish. Yeah? Just plain old rubbish. So it's good to be able to identify rubbish as rubbish. Otherwise, if you can't tell the difference between fresh fruit and rubbish fruit, you know, then you're going to eat the wrong thing.